Hi there, welcome to another video. This time I'm going to be talking about possibly one of the most influential guns in the collection, and I'll explain a little bit more about why in a minute, but the 0.5 inch Vickers. So this is basically a scaled up version of the normal Vickers machine gun design, and it's quite interesting. It's very different to the other 0.5 inch guns that existed, or the 50 cal machine guns. So we're going to go through it in a little bit more detail and explain how it was used and what we've got here in the collection. So this example is the Mark V 0.5 inch Vickers machine gun. So unlike the 303 guns, it takes a different scale of marks to the 303 guns. So 303 guns, we've got marks 1 through to 7. And or 21 if we include the Australian tank gun. And then with the 0.5 inch guns, we've got marks 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And this is a Mark V Vickers. It's a tank gun. It's made for fitting into light tanks. And this is what the British Army had equipping their Mark VI light tanks at the start of the Second World War. It was dramatically rendered obsolete quite quickly because of its armour-piercing capability. It did what it needed to in the late 1930s and into the early part of the Second World War, and it certainly saw good service with North African troops and the British Expeditionary Force in Egypt, where it would penetrate early German armour. It didn't see much of that. It saw mainly Italian armour, but it would penetrate that quite well. And it's a bespoke round, so we'll have a look at this in a little bit more detail. But just as a quick comparison, this is a 50 cal Browning round. This is the 0.5 inch Vickers round. It's very different, and as you can see quite quickly, they're not compatible. The cases are not compatible. The bullets are the same diameter, hence being 0.5 inch or 12.7 mil. But they are not the same cartridge or head, or any part of it is not interchangeable whatsoever. So quickly before I go on to the specs, why is this influential in the collection? Well, it's £63 on its own. So a normal Vickers runs between around £40. The earlier guns are about 30 to 35. But this is £63, and it's a lump. It really is. So we've put it on the base here. It's not designed to be mounted on a tripod. It's designed to be mounted in an armoured vehicle, in a tank. So when, this has been in the collection now since about 2000, the year 2000. And it's one that's always been sort of admired. There's very few of them around. And it was always in our loft. So when the collection, I had it for a long time. It was up in my room, in the loft above my room. And if somebody wanted to see this, I had to go into the loft and get it and carry it down. And what that meant was pain, quite a lot of the times, damage. I'd drop it and it would rattle everything if I did. And it made it quite apparent that if more and more people wanted to come and see the collection, we'd have to put it on display. So with some convincing and negotiations with my parents, we found a ground floor area that we could put it on display. And now what you can look at on the other videos on the channel is what that's turned into probably about 10 years later. What will be 2020? Yeah, about 2010 was when we first put the collection on the ground floor somewhere so people could come and see. Before that, maybe actually a little bit after 2010, but before that, we'd had to get the displays out, especially. It wasn't as easy to come and visit. So influential because of that. Influential also because it sets it apart. This collection's about the Vickers machine guns, and not just about the Mark I on a tripod. The Mark V 0.5 inch here. You've possibly seen the videos on the Vickers gas-operated guns as well, and we'll go through all the other different Vickers machine guns that we've got. But this is the other Vickers machine gun in British service. So to talk about the marks of 0.5 inch Vickers, we've got the Mark I, an experimental gun. Looks very much just like a scaled up normal ground 303 gun, but it's scaled up in size. With a lot more weight and material to absorb all of the recoil from that 0.5 inch round. The Mark II was the first production gun, would be mounted on Carden Lloyd light armoured vehicles, was mounted in some of the early tanks as well. You know, these are all late 1920s developments. Then in the early 30s we get to the Mark III, and the Mark III's probably had the longest service of them all, because it was the anti-aircraft gun that you see mounted in banks of 4 on Royal Navy ships, in banks of 2 on motor torpedo boats, or air sea rescue launches. You'd see the 2 guns in their little turret, and then perhaps Vickers gas-operated guns on the side of the bridge. So the Mark III was not a tank gun; it was an anti-aircraft gun made for ships. Then you get into the Mark IV, another tank gun, and then eventually, in 1933, this is brought into service as the Mark V, and it stays into service into August 1944. When it's declared obsolete. There were still, though, a number of guns in use after they'd come out of the tanks. So they really came out of the tanks in 1941. The Mark VI-B was the last light tank with these in. It was replaced in the sea with the 15mm Bisa. So the A and the B had this alongside a Mark VI or a Mark VII 303-inch gun. As the main armament there in the turret, whereas the Mark VI-C has the 15mm Bisa alongside the 7.9mm Bisa. So it gets replaced in British tank service by the Bisa, and then eventually the Bisa and the Browning operate alongside as the tank guns. But where these do stay in service is the Long Range Desert Group. They start to mount these on the back of some of their trucks as an anti-armour weapon. So you might have one truck in a patrol with, or 2 trucks in a patrol with these on the back, another one with a boys anti-tank rifle, or a truck with this, a truck with a boys, and a truck with a 303-inch Vickers on the back. The configurations vary over time, but the Long Range Desert Group made the last sort of ground use of these guns. And as I said, they're not made for tripod mounting, so they fit into one of the sort of tank mountings. Anything on the back of the trucks would have to have been a bespoke or an adaptation of a mounting. There is a tripod adapter that fits this onto a normal Mark IV tripod, but that's really for training purposes only. So let's look at some of the accessories that came with the Mark V Vickers. You probably recognise the ammunition box. Very, very similar to the number 10 ammunition box used with the 303-inch tank guns. It's got the small part of the lid that lifts up here, and then you can lift up the rest of the lid to take the ammunition belt in and out. The ammunition belt is 100 rounds, not 250. It's 100 rounds. It doesn't have the elongated strips in it, but it does have the brass tabs to keep the rounds separate. You'll see in here I'm using resin rounds, because actually these are really scarce rounds to get hold of. We have a few in the collection. We've got a couple of drill rounds, but to get 100 to fill the belt, anywhere between 10 and 20 pounds per round, it's clearly quite an investment. So you've got the ammunition box in the belt. This is what was being used in the tank guns. You can see, quite a long lead on that in the ground. What was also in use were these disintegrating links. That was what was being used on the Mark III gun. So the Mark III gun used the same ammunition. There was a Class D 0.5 inch as well, a high velocity that used a longer round, and Vickers also sold a commercial variant of the 0.5 inch round in a different grain, different loading, different size head as well. A different grain in the head, different weight. So there are actually 3 types of 0.5 inch Vickers round, but the British Armed Forces all used the same. The Japanese, I think, used the Class D-Star, which is the high velocity gun, which, as I've had some discussion, really has really high energy in the round. So, disintegrating link as well. And what you do see on the so the Mark V that we've got here is a right-hand feed. A left-hand feed block was available as well, primarily for the anti-aircraft guns as well. And this one's actually got the serial number for a Mark III gun, and it's got some N stampings to indicate naval use. But it's a left-hand feed block there, so that you could have the two guns mounted side by side with the ammunition coming in or being ejected, or so the ammunition belts or links going out in a different direction. The ejection tube on the gun actually puts the empty cases out to the front here. So if we have a closer look at the gun itself, you've got, say, pretty similar to the Mark III, to the 303-inch gun. Two main differences though: you've got side opening top cover. Again, so you can do that inside the armoured vehicle without having to flap up the full top cover. The Mark IV, Mark VI, Mark VII tank guns also had this. But you then have a select fire lever, not something you commonly see on the Vickers. So it would go from full auto to repeat, so i.e. semi-automatic fire. And that interrupts the trigger bar mechanism, so that you don't have... so if you're on rapid, it doesn't operate fully automatically. Clearly we can't demonstrate that, but not something often seen on the Vickers machine guns. Other than that, it's standard. Lock, again, bigger. Substantial size difference with the lock and the other components. But it's there. It's quite. It's a Vickers lock. There is a safety catch on it as well, which we'll just look at in a moment, from the left hand side, that you have to depress. The feed block, as I said, you've got a right hand feed block like so, but directly interchangeable would be the left hand feed block, just slot straight in there, and you've got a weapon, let's say on the mainly on the naval guns, that could operate from both sides. Substantial reinforcement around the barrel there as well. The water jacket is exactly the same as you'd normally see on a Vickers. So you'd fill it at the rear, top that up at the rear, and then the condenser. The boiling mechanism remains the same. It doesn't have a ring around the front, because what you do is you take this screw out, the sort of valve out, and you connect that into, alongside the valve that's underneath here, connect that into the armoured vehicle's cooling mechanism, so perhaps into their radiator. So you plug it into the vehicle's water supply. You don't have to worry about topping that up that much. On the other side, we've got the fusee spring, that main operating mechanism there, and we've got that enlarged fusee showing there. Notice the holes on here. That's again so it can key into the armoured fighting vehicles. You'd almost have a catcher bag there for the spent ammunition belt to come through. The AFVs did not, or the tanks did not use the disintegrating link that's commonly seen. They used the belts, so they needed to catch that. You can see down here, this is the safety catch, and we've got a trigger there with the pistol grip that can actually take two fingers rather than just a single finger of a normal trigger. On the rear of the gun, we've got the slots here that would actually fit a pad or a not rudimentary, but a shoulder shoulder stock there, so that you can put your shoulder into the weapon. More for aim, because it would be fitted with a telescope or periscope to be able to aim it. But you're not expected to be able to absorb the recoil of the weapon through this, through your own firing. These were solid brass, so are very, very scarce, and we don't have one in the collection, sadly. And then a look at the markings that are on this. So marked up with Mark V to tell us which mark of gun it is, G437 being the serial number, VA, Vickers Armstrongs being the production, and then we've got some nice 1938 inspection and acceptance stamps on this as well. So you can see, it clearly was a pre-war constructed gun, and may have seen service early on in the Second World War. There's quite a few accounts of these being delivered separate to the tanks into France and Flanders in 1940, and having to be left behind in their transit chests of no use to anyone. So the guns are quite scarce. Not just because of that, but because they were declared obsolete during the war as well. So weapons that are declared obsolete during conflict are more likely to go back through recognised disposal routes. This clearly survived, thankfully, and it's been in the collection now for 20 years. So here I've just got some of the accessories and spares for the 0.5 inch, just to show how they're scaled up from the 303 sort of brothers that they had. So here we've got the bore scope, or the reflector, the mirror reflector used for inspecting the bore. And you can see the one on the left is the standard 303 item, the one on the right is the 0.5 inch. And it's just a much bigger item. And aside from the handle, everything else is scaled up quite simply. The same on the clearing plug. The one on the right here, the lower one, is the 0.5 inch, the one above it is the 303. Handle exactly the same, a scaled up plug to go into the chamber. And then you've got the fusee that operates the recoil mechanism of the gun. The one on the left is the 0.5 inch and the one on the right is the 303. Just a slightly bigger component. Different linkage, how it keys into the fusee spring, you can see there, but otherwise exactly the same. One of the differences, because this gun doesn't have a muzzle attachment, is in the combination tool. You can see actually it's just a normal sort of spanner that fits onto the flash eliminator nut there. This example's for the Mark III gun, so it's actually a flash eliminator rather than just the standard barrel nut there. But everything else is the same. You've got the nut connecting rod, spanner for the flash eliminator, and then on the other side you can see the N of Naval 0.5 inch VMG 1941. So some of the other just items we've got in the collection, we've got one of the spare parts boxes here that just opens up there. This has been sort of adapted to fit sort of smaller trays that we haven't restored yet, but that's for the 0.5 inch guns. So on the side, if we could just go around there, just see, there we go, guns, Vickers 0.5 boxes, spare parts number 2. We've got an ammunition box here. It's a naval ammunition box that actually was to carry, I think it's 375 length, 75 round lengths of disintegrating link ready to put on the drums for the Mark III anti-aircraft guns. So the links are there ready. Perhaps one day we'll get around to putting enough resin rounds in there to fill it up. And then we also have, just behind that there, is I think it's a H1 box for carrying 25 rounds on disintegrating link, normally drill purpose, carried in those small quantities. A small white metal spare parts box for small parts within the turret of the tank as well. So that carried 303 inch spare parts and 0.5 inch, and then a few more of the 0.5 inch bout boxes there to go inside the armoured vehicle, hence why being painted white so you can see them inside in low light conditions. So there we go. I hope you found that interesting, and one of the more interesting weapons that we've got in the collection, the 0.5 inch Mark V Vickers machine gun. Please remember to subscribe to the channel. Please support us on Patreon. It's really helpful. We're sharing the Small Arms Committee minutes there at the moment, which will actually talk through the development and the trials of this weapon and the other 0.5 inch weapons as well. Please consider going on Teespring, our new shop where we've got some of the branded merchandise available. Always support us, and we'll try and get these informative videos out to you as quickly as we possibly can. Thanks for watching. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and share the video and subscribe to the channel. Please support us on Patreon if you're able to, and let us know of anything you'd like to see in the future. I look forward to hearing from you.